So this is a very interesting and elusive hexagram. And as you know, I generally don't refer to authorities, modern authorities, even medieval authorities. I think that the Gua text tells me stuff that I can rely on. The rest is so infused with opinions. I digest it very, very carefully. I mean, and I know that that flies in the face of a lot of Book of Changes study, which would be to see, what Yang Yung Song said and what Wei Wu Wei said, and so on and so forth. But I have actually had a good look at Wilhelm this time, and I can't help saying I just think he's wrong. So, so um, that's a bit egregious. There we go. Okay, so we have hexagram 61, Zhong Fu, Inner Sincerity. It is one of those ones that you can see from the shape of it, something about what it is. We have the soft center protected by the tough outside. Um, so you could guess it was something about that, something about vulnerability, innocence, something like that. Anyway, the legendary ZC credit, who is credited with chunks of the doctrine of the mean. Diana, you may know how much of that. Um, he says, only he under heaven who has reached complete sincerity is able to fully develop his nature. And we have this idea of sincerity, um, which is quite an elusive idea. So we'll return to that in a second. So the purpose of these sessions, in which we'll consider the hexagram in its entirety, as well as the implications of each line as it changes, is threefold. One, to offer some ideas as to what the hexagram may mean to anyone who may have cast it today. And I suggest that that is exactly what you've done by being here now. You haven't thrown coins or cast yarrow stalks or looked at a car number plate. You have chosen to be here, and here we are. So, and you have no control over what I'm going to say. So I suggest to you, whether it is good, bad, or ugly, this is what you have drawn today. Secondly, I want to draw attention to the underlying timeless wisdom. I mean, there are some extraordinary insights in the Book of Changes, including in the line text, but particularly in the Gua text. And to assess the extent to which the hexagram reflects current events, which we do with greater or lesser success every month. The words here, Zhong Fu. Zhong is the center, the middle, as in Zhongguo, the Middle Kingdom. That character um, appears in a lot of words. I mean, I am no expert on the way, which stroke means which. But the character for the monkey clearly is related, and the character for Yang Wood is clearly related. The Middle Kingdom, people tend to think the Middle Kingdom is a modest geographical description. It's not. It says this is the only place that counts. That's what's meant by the Middle Kingdom. Fu, confidence, faith, trust. I think those are important distinctions because they're almost the same. I mean, confidence comes from the same root as the word faith. And in Latin, I think I'm right in saying that fides means both faith and trust. um, I both of them are interesting words because do you need to have faith in something, or can you just have faith in the abstract? I rather think the second, and trust the same. But um, it's a commonplace that we need to trust ourselves, trust the process, um, trust the Tao, whatever. But trust in the abstract is not even that. It's a freestanding trust. It's an act of will to simply trust. What does Jesus say? Is it Jesus who says something about the blessed are those who believe who never actually saw you? Someone else probably knows
Mhm.
the quotation.
Yeah.
Is that Jesus? Is that St. Paul?
Yes. Yeah. It is. It is. When Thomas speaks, isn't it? It's in that
Oh,
speech.
right. So we're talking about Thomas doubting, and he's saying,
Hmm.
"Blessed are those who didn't doubt,
Yeah.
having not seen." Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So trust. I invite you to take a moment to look at this word trust, because we tend to think of it needing to be in something. Faith, we tend to think it needs to be in something, but it is something that we can, by an act of will, simply choose. And I suggest that in a world where anything can happen, it's probably the most sensible approach because we spend a lot of our time striving in feng shui and other disciplines to make ourselves safe, but ultimately we're out of control. We are, as I sometimes say, spinning in darkness alone on an imaginary ball of mud. But we create superstructures to convince ourselves there's something else. Discuss, of course. Zhongfu, sometimes called inner sincerity, has a soft center, as you can see from the shape. That is the only part that is soft. Its shape recalls hexagram number 28, preponderance of the great, of which it is something like the converse. So hexagram 28 is um, yin, yin, yang, 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 yin. So I say it is something like the converse, maybe something like the converse of hexagram 62, actually more appropriately perhaps, which I sometimes call little impact, which is thunder over mountain, which is yin yin yang yang yin yin. Anyway, the hexagrams, as you know, are grouped like that. Now, the word sincerity is an interesting one. It's derived from Latin words sine and sera. And honestly, I didn't look them up yesterday. I knew that already. Sine, as in sine qua non, without which nothing, and cera, meaning wax, as in ceramic, triceratops, rhinoceros. And this is what's interesting about it. In Roman usage, the word was employed to describe a sword that had not been subject to a fraudulent practice whereby damaged weapons were returned to their owners as if they'd been reconditioned, when in truth the cracks had been filled with wax, which would crumble or melt at the first use of the sword in anger. Interestingly, in Chinese metaphysics, the lap yum, you remember those, there are 30 of those, one for every 2 years. Which are actually a part of feng shui rather than bazi, but I use those in any of your bazis. I've told you what the lapium is. It will be, pine tree or mulberry tree or whatever. But white wax metal is clearly drawing on exactly the same idea. So there is this idea of deceit that is hard to detect. There is this idea of trustworthiness being beyond whether you're being observed or not. And this is a tricky hexagram, and I will be infallible as to what I draw from it. But genuine inner sincerity means that you don't even cheat when no one's watching. You are impeccable, and it's not a question of agreement, a question of votes. It's a question of working from a principle that works, I think. So one implication of Zhongfu is that the gentle yin qualities at its heart need the protection of the yang lines at the exterior. Another is that the yang in some sense imprisons the yin, which may be confirmed by the presence of yang lines at the center of each of the component trigrams. And here's the thing. So if we equate the yin with woman, and I would tend to think of yin as meaning feminine rather than female, perhaps, and we equate the yang with male, we may be looking at some rather insightful positions. And this is where King Wen is so interesting. So is it a given, is it an absolute about human nature that women need to be guarded? That the yin needs to be hidden away and protected? Is that a given? I mean, if it is a given, the question needs to be asked, from whom? And I suggest that wearing a burqa is not to protect women from men. It's to protect men from women. It's not because men are powerful, it's because women are. So is it a given that women need guarding? And I give you this idea, um, I'm fallible. I may be getting the wrong end of the stick, but bear with me. You may find this interesting anyway. So, is it a given that women need guarding, and if so, on whose behalf? If so, is such protection actually a defense against the yang itself?
Hello.
No.
Um, has anyone here read David Graeber's book, The Dawn of Everything? Graeber. You might write that down. He's a kind of sociologist, historian, political theorist. I mean, he is. He died. He was American but worked over here. He wrote a book called um, Debt: The First 5,000 Years, which is a fascinating book as well. But at the dawn of everything, he argues that ideas of the way civilizations develop um, are less black and white than you might think. Given there is historically a dispute with people who think that human beings are inherently good and just need a bit of organizing, and those who think human beings are inherently murderous and evil, and therefore need to be bullied in order to keep under control. The first being the view of theorists like Locke, for instance. Some of you know I spent about 25 minutes studying philosophy in the 70s. So I've read a little bit of Locke, but not since. And the other position is Hobbes, which is about life being nasty, brutish, and short, and we need the Leviathan to keep us in shape. I think Albert, correct me if I'm getting the philosophy wrong. Anyway, he argues that the ultimate, guess what he thinks is the ultimate unit of currency? The woman.
Mm.
Again, I invite you to give that some thought. This is a very contemporary consideration, but it is not beyond King Yen to be making just such a point with the reference to suckling pigs and fishes in the Gua text, which is, as we know, significantly older than the line text. And Wilhelm's insistence, however, that those pigs and fishes are the least intelligent of animals and therefore the hardest to influence makes no sense at all. I think he has absolutely the wrong end of the stick. The suckling pigs and fishes, I think, mean much deeper things than what Wilhelm is reaching to. Those pigs and fishes, there is a translation. I think Blofeld translates them together as being dolphins, which is an interesting thing as well. Dolphins being one of the Western images of the diviner. The Delphic oracle. Yes, Elga.
You also have this thing of suckling pigs. The pig is the closest human analog biologically. That's really kind of well known, used in a lot of experimentation because of their similarity to the human. So that's a sort of an absolute fact. And you have the thing, the symbolism, Chinese, the fish, the cart making their way up the river as a sign of mental achievement, of academic achievement, that whole thing of the importance of the fish every which way you count them. So it's not likely to be the meanest, the lowest of creatures that are being referred to in
Yeah.
any which way.
Yep. Yep. And fish have a lot of religious symbolism. They take I mean, the high row and so on and so forth. And pigs. I mean, there are kind of non-fringe scientific accounts that somehow we have pig in our DNA, which kind of makes sense relative to what you're saying, Elder. I mean, that's a fairly outrageous view, but it's not that far out of the fringes. Anyway, we digress. So the trigrams of wind and lake are themselves yin, both in construction and within the family, eldest and youngest daughter respectively. With the future assured by the presence of women of fertile age, are we now equipped to cross the great stream? So is that why in the Gua text we are ready to cross the great stream? Because I think I'm right in saying that in the Book of Changes it advises more often not to cross the great stream than it does to cross the great stream. And do we need to be protected in folk in order to do it? is this like you know, drawing the wagons around the women? Some make of the joining of these two trigrams, some the gentle and Dway the joyous, just such confidence as we were referring to. Some see, as I said, not simple fishes but dolphins. It's hard to resist drawing attention to the fact the dolphin is in Western semiotics a symbol of the diviner. For Wilhelm, however, apparently the image relates to the Junzer, that is, superior man, who is by his account merciful and slow to condemn. Now, I'm not arguing that the Junzer, or in Jewish parlance, the Mensch, is merciful and slow to condemn, and as Wilhelm says, will take pains to understand the rationale for a crime before making judgment. But when Wilhelm suggests that that is a principle of medieval Chinese justice, I think he is really looking through rose-colored glasses, because at least, I mean, prior to that, certainly um, around the time of the formation of China, the unification of China around 310 BC, the dominant legal system was what's called legalism, which essentially says punishment is, stick is better than carrot. That punishment is a better way of keeping people in line than reward. Anyway, for Wilhelm, however, apparently the image relates to Junzer, that is superior man, who is by his account merciful and slow to condemn. Such magnanimity implies that something like undisputed leadership has devolved to the two central yang lines, only one of which is correct, while both are firm. Sorry, yin lines, first typo, which are firm and central, and is the fifth, that is the ruler, either because it is the most favorable line, most likely, or the most typical, which it is not. So we have again this yin yang thing, that the way that the hexagrams are structured is biased towards the yang, because only a yang line could be at the fifth and be central and correct. Firm, central and correct. Well, central and correct, actually. The fifth is the rule of the majority of the hexagrams, and indeed only a yang line can be central and correct the fifth, which is a bit of a thumb on the scales. It's kind of weighted that in favor of the yang. We might compare hexagram 62, sometimes called Little Impact, mountain over thunder, thunder over mountain, where the center is held by the yang. Are the outer yin lines a different sort of buffer here, protected not against external danger, but the foolishness of the inflexible yang within? So do we have different ways of organizing people? One is where the women are protecting the men from their foolishness, and the other, which I know you like that one better, or the other is where the gentle frailty of woman is protected by the men, and is not that apparent need for protection. Someone's not muted. Someone's not muted.
Me, wait.
Got some background dialogue. So I suggest to you these ideas. I hope these aren't too arcane, but I suggest to you these ideas are ones that King Wen is quite capable of having contained in the Gua description. Wilhelm goes on to maintain the merciful ruler epitomized here, who strives to understand the rationales of behavior and is slow to sanction, typifies the entire administration of justice in ancient China. That's a quotation from Wilhelm, the entire administration of justice. I think he's just wrong. This, again, is hard to justify in the light of history. The legalism that informed much Chinese justice in the years that Yi took its current form was at serious odds with such a view. So we have a whole debate going on in the shape of this. And the inner sincerity we're talking about is about sound judgment that is not influenced by votes, not influenced by power, but is influenced by an inner correctness, and it's right in the middle. So we're talking about the middle path. So this hexagram is about the meaning and value of inner sincerity. And is there another sword? Does it imply that the concept is inherently deceitful? These are the ideas I'm throwing about here. So let's have a look at it. So Confucius says, movement with strength, the firm is at a central place and has a correspondent. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's relevant. Anyway, the structure is wind over lake, eldest daughter of youngest daughter. Balance is 2 yin lines, 4 yang lines. Correspondence 1 and 4 and 3 and 6, which means that we have because the correspondence between 1 and 4, there's a kind of a flirtation going on between them, a temptation away from the straight and narrow. And 3 and 6, there's something similar. There is cooperation within the lines. 2 and 3 are yin and yang, 4 and 5 are yin and yang. So there is some kind of joining in there. So it takes account of that need. The host is at the 5th. The ideograph is a hen covering her young with her claws. A hen covering her young with her claws. So I guess what we have there is the idea that a mother instinctively will look after the innocent. We have maybe we have a hen's body in this, where you have wings either side. The hen in the middle, wings either side. But there's something about that image which is about mothering and about this inner sincerity not being something that needed thinking about or codifying, but was kind of biological. And that those of you who are mothers may, recognize this in yourself. I mean, as a father, I do too. Timing 11th month, the rat month, and the nuclear, where it comes from, is number 27, Yi, preponderance of the great, which is about coming pressure. So number 27, mountain over thunder, says, so preponderance of the great. Is it mountain over thunder? It's not mountain over thunder. Second typo. It is lake over wind, isn't it? Lake over wind, preponderance of the great, because the yin is on the outside. Forgive me. Lake over wind, not mountain over thunder. But the point of it is great stress is coming. It's the ridge pole. There's going to be so much stress, the middle is going to give. So the structure means that is what gives birth to this hexagram 61. That Zhong emanates from the Yi, which presages great stress and represents the fire horse year we're living through at the time of writing. So not the Yi, from Yi. That Zhong emanates from the hexagram called Yi. That being the hexagram of the fire horse year, it tells us a great deal about the situation that the supplicant must be subject to. Is good faith only for softies? Discuss. Is there no street cred in good faith? So there's a question. So moving right along, let's look at the text. I quoted Bob Dylan here: to live outside the law, you must be honest. And the Gua text: suckling pigs and fishes, good fortune, advantageous to cross the great stream, profit and divination. So the first of these lines is peculiar to this Gua, suckling pigs and fishes, while the second may be a routine acknowledgement that the burden of the text is optimistic, but it may be much more dense than that. And broadly, I'd say number one is saying, line one is saying, best not to change your mind just yet, and to be faithful to the fourth, which is what you aspire to further up the food chain, further along the journey. Second line is about shared objectives and good faith. The third is about inappropriate vacillation, about it's unstable, it's not to be trusted. The fourth is about a loyal servant. The fifth is about a strong, sincere king who unites the people. And the sixth, as the top line often is kind of overbearing. It's gone a little bit too far. It's a bit up itself. So let's look at that in detail. I have also quoted the legendary Dan Fogelberg. Who knows Dan Fogelberg's music? You do. Do you know the next time? Sacred are the binds that love entrusts us, even when they burn before they bind. The late great Dan Fogelberg. The first line, commitment leads to a good fortune. UG. Utah Buyan. If there's another view, then there is no rest. So it's about arguing possibly. With my translations, I mean, I am not capable of translating these lines myself. I take various translations and kind of mix them together. This is yang, it is firm, it is not central, but it is correct because it's in the first place. So it's going to be kind of hard to move. And the advice is something like flexibility and deep consideration are appropriate, but not if decisions that need to be taken are left hanging. So you can't vacillate beyond a certain point. So if you've thrown this today, it's saying resist the seduction of the fourth line, which may take you into dark places, and you don't need to be agreed with. The truth does not require defense. Better the decision is sound, that is from the heart, than that it is rapid, but it does need to be made. And that beginning is quite a common kind of beginning to a hexagram. It's interesting to know that you can sometimes be a white tiger, Teng She in Chimatanja, as well as a synonym for foretelling. And words meaning divining and foretelling are all over the place here. It changes to wind over water, Huan, hexagram 59, dispersal, which is a withdrawal from the hurly-burly or from leadership. And dispersal may also be the consequence of bad faith. But my image of that is of kind of being out at sea, seabirds just above the surface of the sea, just total dispersal. The second line, the crane calls from the shadows. I mean, and there are different views as to which bird we're talking about. Her chicks call back. So we have that she is reassuring herself that the chicks are all right. So there's perhaps a breakdown in trust there. It's like Orpheus, where Orpheus is coming out of the underworld and he's been told not to look back, but he just can't contain himself. And the crane may be like that. And there's this obscure line, I have a fine goblet I'll share with you, which is perhaps about the sharing of ideas. This line is yang, firm, central, but not correct. So it is kind of sure of itself, but perhaps shouldn't be. So the advice maybe, if you've drawn this, is to be sure your motives are sound, but beware excessive flexibility. Good faith ensures good outcomes, and that is possibly the heart of this. Trust that you are self-reliant. It's also worth pointing out in the translation that woe and woo are both the first person singular. So I have a fine goblet, I'll share it with you. So you might think that the person with the fine goblet is sharing something with the other person, but it actually, the second I'll share with you is sharing something else. And there are commentators who have thought that this is perhaps the crane talking, or perhaps the hexagram talking. The second change, which tells us something about it, whether it's giving us advice, whether it's giving us warning or elaboration. The second change is to wind over thunder, Yi, hexagram 42, increase, another one called Yi. The yin being flexible must hold the rudder. Good faith is the product of inner refinement. Good faith is something we do internally. Third line, De Di Huo. I've called this clinch because it is about joining of people, and it may be a kiss and it may be a fight. I thought clinch was a good word. Huo Ba then beats the drum, then Huo Chi, Huo Jie, stopping and starting, so blowing hot and cold. This is a yin line, so it's not firm. It is not central, and it's not correct. So you are entitled to be uncertain if you draw on this one. Could betray by fraternizing, or is sororizing a word? Does anyone know that? There ought to be a female equivalent to fraternizing, oughtn't there? There'll be something like sororizing. You know the Latin, don't you, Diana? Um, so could we betray by fraternizing with the yin at the fourth, or the yang in the superior position at the sixth? Are we looking for approval from above? Are we um, respecting power inappropriately? Are we confusing money with merit, which is a sickness of our times? But the third line, it's time to commit. And huo, H-U-O, however one pronounces it, is a word that implies dithering. So you can't dither. You have to make your own mind up. You do need to make a decision. Try not to be over-influenced either by the temptations of the flesh pots of the fourth or the authority which is likely to be fraudulent of the sixth. There is this something here about respecting people for their position rather than for their value, as I say. The confusion between money and merit. Changes to window of heaven, Shao Chu, hexagram 9, lesser opportunity. Perhaps it's suggesting it's the last chance to get clear what you're up to. The fourth line, if you draw on this, the moon is almost full. A horse loses its pair. That word is Peter Firebrace's word, a horse losing its pair. Beautifully economical translation. One of those things, would you? It happens. Shit happens. Would you? The yin, it is yin, correct, not firm, not central. So it is right, but it's not firm or central. So there is this possibly temptation. I say it's right. It thinks it's right anyway. Almost perfectly positioned, but loses connection with her roots at the first in order to serve common cause with the ruler at the fifth. So there's something about deliberately choosing to be in the service of the ruler, and it feels like a virtuous choice. It feels like it is not a dereliction of responsibility to do the bidding of someone who is rightly in charge. So in this place, you are neither over nor under influenced, and it's probably appropriate to, as D.H. Lawrence says, trust the tale, not the teller, but to value the advice that comes from someone who clearly lives by it, means it, and whose life exemplifies it. That is not a corrupt thing to do. It's simply an awareness of people who might be further along the path. But as I say, it does not mean that money and merit are the same thing, or that position and merit are the same thing, as politics in several corners of the world is making very clear, abundantly clear at this point. So a tough and correct moral decision, freely made, but having looked out for, what's the word I'm looking for, having researched, having been open to better ideas, but not because the person who says them is more important, but because they're better ideas. The fourth change is to heaven overlake, Lu stepping, hexagram 10. I always like this one because when someone draws this, it says kind of try again, because it's heaven over lake. And if you follow the progress of the hexagram, of the chi, if you will, it's yang yang yin, yang yang yang, and all the text is about being careful not to step on the tiger's tail, if I remember rightly. We've had a tiger mentioned already. So it's about approaching cautiously, but it suggests that at the third attempt, things might work if the first two didn't, or it might mean if the first two steps are safe, the third one might not be. So you might interpret this in terms of your attempt at a project, the third go might be worth doing, or you might interpret it in the sense that you've won your last two matches and the next one you might be lucky with a score draw. Both of those interpretations it's open to, but I always find it interesting to watch that. It is a very unbalanced hexagram. The third move may have been false. Tread carefully. If you tread on the tiger's tail, you may get bitten. Tigers hiding all over this text. 9 at the 5th, Yu Fu Luan Ru Wu Ju. Sincerity serves as a bond, no error. So what that's saying is that you might say the mystical wing of religions tend not to disagree. You won't find a Sufi disagreeing with a Quaker, for instance. But it's also saying that if you are in relationship with, whether we're talking about partnership or whether we're talking about being part of the same group, part of the same political party, even, that if you're coming from the same principles, then the sincerity of the leader is trustworthy and will unite the people. And Bob Dylan, I'm quoting Bob Dylan a bit tonight. He said, "Don't follow leaders and watch your parking meters. You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows." So we don't follow leaders because they know better. We can follow leaders because they are sincere. And what my teacher, Chuck Spezzano, would say, and I'm sure I've said this several times, so forgive me if I'm boring you, being 100% open is safe. Being 99% open is dangerous. We're going to be open. We have to be open. And this is suggesting that we can be open to be entirely open with a leader who is genuinely sincere. And we may judge them by the toughest rules, but if that is the case, then we are safe to follow them. The 5th change is to fire over lake, Kwai, Hexagram 38, diversity or perversity. I sometimes call it the flibberty gibbet, because I'm in a house where Julie Andrews is God. The sound of music is required watching here. Anyone here not watch The Sound of Music? No? Okay, well, exactly. A will-o'-the-wisp, a flibberty gibbet, a clown, diversity. The unexpected and harmless, the time to jump even with your eyes closed. We're at the 5th line. You don't have much more time to think about this decision. You might accept that the first divination is correct. But it is time to jump. This is the host. This is where the rule is, where we make up our mind. Which brings us finally to a yang at the 6th, which has gone too far, which the top line often does, gets a bit up itself. There's a yang, it is not central, central is incorrect. So it's stubborn and wrong. It is an outlier. It is strutting. In the West Ring, do you remember that Martin Sheen says we don't strut. Do you remember that? We don't strut. The just brings to mind the West Wing as a fantasy. We don't strut. So this is someone who struts. So probably if this represents a person, these are questions that are germane to you, if they are overly proud, overly sure of themselves, overly self-satisfied, they're probably wrong. And they are calling to the 3rd line for help and they are not heard. So they're very likely out of their depth. There is probably a relationship between being demonstratively smart and actually being out of your depth. So immodest, empty and doomed. It is too late. This is, and the cock crows earlier on. So there's all this bird imagery. And in Western imagery, a cock crowing has an overtone, not just of a wake-up call, but also of someone, a man rather more pleased with himself than he might be. And we might apply that, as we shall attempt to what's happening in the world at the moment. So the final change is to Lake Over Thunder, Jian, Hexagram 60, restriction. And the restriction here, because it is, it's not Lake Over Thunder. Is it Lake Over Thunder? No, it's not. So that's typo number 4, isn't it? It's water over lake, number 60, isn't it? Is that the correct one? Yeah, it is. Water over lake, restriction. Not Lake Over Thunder, beg your pardon. And restriction is unwished for. So I think in these monologues I have more than once, I think I've compared Jian, which is restriction that you didn't ask for, with hexagram 47, exhaustion, which is restriction you did ask for because of the foolish objectives you took on in hexagram number 46. I know I've talked about that before. So this is get on with it and be careful who you trust, the last line, because they may be pretending. They may be paying lip service. That's the thing. So finally, let's look at this in the context of what's happening in the outside world. I've quoted here Polonius, one of the most famous quotations from Shakespeare. This above all things to thine own self be true. Polonius gets bad press. His critics tend to think of him as a windbag, but he says some good stuff. And he comes to sticky end as well, doesn't he? He's he's stabbed through the curtain, isn't he? By Hamlet. Anyway, so it didn't do him any good, maybe. So looking at this, technically, this hexagram 59, Juan, dispersal, wind over water, kicked in on the 5th of March. So this last week, we have had this thing about dispersing forces, crowds, property, and whole nations. And if you follow my daily stuff, you'll notice that it is unwittingly rather positive, where I've talked about there being peace after a dispute. That's what I made of today. And I write these things weeks ahead. So if I'm totally wrong, I'm innocently totally wrong. But that was my reading. Who knows? I'll look at the news in a minute. Dispersing forces, crowds, property, and whole nations. The first week of this month. I think that is pretty much what's been going on. Second one, changing sides, and there are two first person singulars I pointed out to you. This kicked in yesterday. Hexagram 42, Yi, which is increase, which is wind over thunder. The best man for a job is a woman. The two eyes might speak of a yin eye and a yang eye. I hadn't thought that. In line 2, we might be coming from the position of the defenseless yin in the middle of the hexagram. We might be coming from the position of the massed yang either side. Increase might make some sense of that, and changing sides might as well. So there's something here about changing sides. I don't know, you might relate that to American politics, to Democrats, paying attention to what the word that describes their party actually means. And you might, God, it's not this chaos is not restricted to the US, of course. But there is something there about flexibility, something there about perhaps some people seeing the long-term impact of some of these insane diplomatic decisions that have been made over the last week, not just American ones. Third line, Xiao Chu, lesser opportunity, wind over heaven. Yeah, that's correct. Where you might think of that as being stepping over the weak line is the fourth line. Maybe there's a tiger on the fourth line. I don't think there is in the text, but it is an opening for peace. It does look as if that ambassador, who would typically live at the second or third line, is traveling upwards, and they are vulnerable. They are innocent. They could be a sitting duck, but it's an opening for peace. The week beginning the 15th of March. Do the Ides begin on the 15th? The Ides begin on the 3rd, 13th, or the 12th, don't they? Does anyone know? Elga, you look as if you do know.
It's a long time since I've been in a Latin class, but I think it's the 13th.
Yeah, but it's several days, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 Okay. So you'd probably come across Sincerity before as well.
Yes.
Sincere, I mean, without wax. Yeah. So it may be the Ides that may tell us something. That that could be a very interesting implication, which I'm not going to go into any further. You can probably, see why I might not do. Fourth line, correct, not firm, not central. It is stepping, hexagram 10. So you fall at the third step, perhaps. That may be the third country that you invade. It might be, you know, twice, twice might be misfortune. Third starts to look like carelessness. And that's from the 20th of March. From the 25th, reinforcements or fresh viewpoints, quai the diverse, being bound by their word, because that relates to where it is in the hexagram itself. And the final one, there is a kind of fatuous certainty, faithlessness. It's really not very hopeful. And I try to get the balance between the gutter and the stars. I'm quoting Oscar Wilde for those of you I haven't repeated 1,000 times. We're all of us in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And the trick is to be looking at the stars. But hexagram 30 definitely looks like gutter. We have to be aware of what's going on and not run by what's going on. And if you're anything like me, first thing in the morning, you go through a ritual of going, right, same shit, different day. I will approach it with joy. I will approach it with trust. And I will concentrate on what matters. So that, I think, is everything I have to say about this. Anyone have anything insightful to say, or are you're stunned by the number of outrageous ideas here? Yes, Simone. Hi, but this is Simone. You haven't met Simone before. Hi, Simone.
Hello. I think it looks like the dragon door in a building.
Oh, do you? Interesting.
And I feel like that's the feminine in there, like where it has to give. Like if we have a wall up
Yep.
to guard something, but if there was no place for it to give a little bit, it would just like fall down upon you. So there's that opening, that vulnerability, but it's right in the center. It's like the most vulnerable point, but you have to be vulnerable somewhere. But that's the best point, to be vulnerable at, right in the center. Like if the opening was lower or to the side, it would make it uneven. There's a lot to be said about masculine and feminine in this hexagram.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I'm tempted to quote Leonard Cohen, who says, "There's a crack in everything. It's how the light gets in."
Well, and also that we're, since I last saw you, I mean, we're at war with Iran, where the big question about whether women are being guarded. I mean, the things that I've seen about modern Iran, the women are quite happy, or seem to be. They're very educated. I mean, I think there's like 80% women at the university. I see that restriction in a very different way than what we seem to be viewing it. I watched it. I'm sure you've heard of Rick Steves before. He goes to great places. He has great shows, but he's kind of a creep. And I was watching one about Iran. It was from like 9 years ago. And he's walking all over the place and he's talking to young women. And he just keeps asking them about boyfriends and stuff like that. And they're like, what are you doing, dude? They're just like shaking their head, like, grow up, sir. We're here reading poetry and and studying to be engineers, and you're asking us about our boyfriends. Like he just seemed like such a like pitiful, ugly American almost. But they were still so gracious to him, and they were like, "Yay, America!" And everybody wanted to talk to him, and I was embarrassed for America, and really actually felt quite good about what I saw about Iran, and the beautiful. I just watched a show about the beautiful gardens there and the civilization, and what a shame. It's just a terrible shame. It's like we don't understand what it means to actually protect our women. Maybe we need to learn something from another culture. I'm
You,
just I
You might argue that women need protecting physically because they're less robust. There is an argument for that, though a lot of trans thinking doesn't buy into that. And certainly there is the argument that a woman who is sexually active up until the last 50 years would be very vulnerable for most of her adult life,
Right.
one way or another. So there is that. But so much bullshit legislation and bullshit, declaiming by men claims to be about protecting women when it is not. You know,
No, this is not a free place. When we're arguing it about our rights every time there's a new administration. Like that's ridiculous.
it's never been signed into law, has it?
They go from federal to state and state, like back and forth. And at any given time, there's, a handful of states where you can do something and a handful of states where you can't do something. And it changes every few years.
But the Equality Act, if I remember rightly, has been gathering dust for about 60 years. Am I right?
That I don't know.
I mean,
That
it's
that
not the
I
Equality Act, it's the Equality Bill. I mean, it's part of feminist history, isn't it? In the US.
that I can't give you a timeline on that.
I mean, I only know something about it because I watched the documentary. I haven't read the books in this particular case. But there's do you know about the history of women's football or women's soccer for your benefit?
I guess
No.
I don't.
Well, it was actually banned by the FA, the Football Association in this country, because they were so um, uneasy with women being in physical contact with each other. I mean, God knows what was going on in the men's minds. But it was actually the FA. I think it was actually illegal in the UK from about 1922 to about 1970, and um, seriously discouraged because it would, make women think they could do all sorts of things that men were very, threatened by. I mean, like being in love with each other, for instance. Extraordinary, just extraordinary. And I always think of, the burqa is telling me how much men fear the power of women, and how much they fear each other. But it is not about male strength. It is maybe about male force, which is perhaps different. I'm sorry, I probably go on
No,
this too often,
it's
probably.
it's I mean, this is a really deep one. This, because it says it is if it is, and if it is, it is. You just keep going back and forth, asking more questions versus getting an answer, right? The hexagram just keeps giving you more questions.
I think it's about radical trust, radical faith, radical interdependence, if you like. All right, yes, Elga.
No, that's it. Absolutely. Just what you last said is radical interdependence. Because going right back to your beginning, Richard, when you said about, sorry, I'll skip that. For me, I can't get rid of this idea of the womb-like space in the middle. The space. Just call that collective potentiality. Okay. And then if you take the idea that without woman, it's doing the executive business of procreation, without woman doing that, there is no future. There's no future for the species. And then again, I'm a woman of a certain age, but I do remember that thing of the pregnancy never feeling before the need for protection that within pregnancy, or put like a vulnerability, you know um, um, it just, I'd never experienced that before. I've been racing around pretending to be some supersonic New York woman who could work 8 days a week, and being one of the top 5% of women earners, and blah blah blah. And so this pregnancy thing was a great surprise to me, right? But if you get to it about this, just as you said, radical interdependence, and it's equality isn't a word that should be allowed anywhere near that concept.
Well,
it just doesn't pertain. Do you know what I mean?
yes, I'm not sure. Yes, it seems to be a different language, equality. And the thing I always notice with the trigrams, there's just such wisdom in Chinese metaphysics. You just have to sort of scratch the surface a bit, and there's such profundity that the yin trigrams have mostly yang lines, apart from mother and father.
Mm-hmm.
The girls have more yang than yin lines,
Mm-hmm.
and the boys have more yin than yang lines, which possibly, is addressing the major misunderstandings between men and women, which is that men
And
men think women are men, and women think men are women.
and there's also the thing, Richard, that we're not just talking physiologically, although there's a lot of that in the lines. But if you take of the idea of every new person being, and the future is, everyone is a spirit. Everyone has there's a spirit to it. And again, the connection with the concept of sincerity, if you take that to the abstract of the spirit of the non-corporeal, okay, then this just as you've been saying, and as Maxine was saying, there it's just full of
Just a what?
you could, it's just full of ideas, this hexagram, more than others, but it does call very distinctly to me, it's about, just your phrase, radical interdependence, but it's also of the soul or the spirit or the non-material. You mentioned the difference of material, non-material in terms of consumerism and modern life, but there's the other difference too between sort of body and soul, or whatever way you want to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
So
good.
the universe is yin and yang, maybe.
Yeah.
And no yin without yang, no yang without yin. So yes, thank you. That's beautifully expressed, Helga. Okay. Anyone else? Anything to say? No? Okay, good, good. Well, you've had that's just very satisfying when it looks like you've all got smiles on your faces and I've said something useful. And you have definitely said some stuff that's very useful, you guys. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
I will see you all in a month, hopefully, and I'll probably see all of you before then anyway. So thank you so much. See
Thank
you
you.
then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.